Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. Season of Mastery has got off to, in my opinion, a surprisingly good start. I've been running some of the Census Plus add-on on my server Kingsfall Alliance, and there has been some 19 to 20,000 characters created since the time of release. A lot of level 1s in there of course, but people are just scouting servers before making their final decisions. A simple login at peak times can of course tell you the story from the server list, where says medium, where says high, where says full, but we don't exactly have the full story of the moment of where you should bother playing. Speaking of mega servers though, the peak population back in Classic that I could find was actually on the server Whitemane, with some 12,000 players. Now looking at TBC, as predicted, players have flocked to a minority of servers to escape world PvP or being a faction minority. In fact, nowadays we have two servers that are over 20,000 population showing up on Warcraft logs, those being Firemore on EU and Benediction NA. This is crazy to be honest, and this is how servers went on retail to the point where now you have mega servers that have over 80,000 players showing up regularly, except instead of sharding, we have our automated layering. By the time Wrath of the Lich King's out, there's going to be a handful of realms per region where the majority of players are. And with our shorter duration for Season of Mastery and well, you know, how every single iteration of WoW has gone ever with server balance, I struggle not to recommend just picking the highest population server depending on whether you like PvE or PvP more. And looking a bit more at the Census Plus add-on, the class distribution is not that bad where I am. It's about what I'd expect, but I bet PvP servers have way more rogues because, you know, rogues and PvP, and they're also meant to be the god tier DPS up to AQ40. Also about PvP, it just so happens, as I'm doing this at least, and this reset, you know how Blizzard said they're going to be doubling the ranking points to speed up ranking? Well, they haven't. Instead, things just look how they did in Classic. It's possible that on the following reset, they're going to have halved decay, but we're going to have to wait to know for sure. Either way, it's a little bit confusing. Now, from a player point of view, as for if we could choose whether to double ranking points or half decay is much more casual friendly. The decay was the thing that you were fighting against to overtake at the higher ranks. So it was already looking like rank 10, at least for many classes, to bridge the gap from raid gear, or in many cases having some BIS for quite a while. Now a lot more people are going to be looking at ranking if it is indeed halved decay. Anyways, back around to servers and leveling. It's not the most to go off with Census Plus and logging in and looking at the population on the login screen, but you know, when you run around Stormwind and there's loads of people, the questing zones are full, people are always looking for dungeon groups, people are actually using the LFG tool that Blizzard put in for TBC. I thought everybody would still be using a bulletin board add-on, which, you know, is fine, but the LFG actually shows you the group size, what classes are in there, and you can put a little note next to your name with your specialization as well. This change on top of the availability of summoning stones make those obscure and hard to get to dungeons so much more popular than they were in Classic. Back in Classic, you had an absolute task to get people to those obscure dungeons like Razorfang Crawl, Down, Shadowfang Keep. Well, speaking from an Alliance point of view, of course, those dungeons in the middle of nowhere. And this is coming from somebody who mained a Warlock as well. Now with just 2 people needing to make the journey, it's helping groups get together considerably. The bonus 40% XP to leveling is noticeable, but not as much as I thought it would be, if I'm honest. The bit that stands out to me is the elite quests giving you the burst of XP, which are really worth doing, and I like that a lot because it encourages people to group up and take on that content. Yes, it really put into perspective just how much XP you were given from the passive mob grinding in Classic. I'm saying this as a middle-ish level character at the moment. I'm beginning to slightly out-level zones and quests that are turning green now, which would have usually been yellow for me still. I think in later levels there won't be those periods where you feel as though you've totally run out of quests to do anywhere. I found this happened back in Classic pretty consistently around level 48 or so, but time will tell. The hardcore scene has really been popping off, several full guilds on different servers, and a considerable amount of viewership over on Twitch and interest as well. The official servers being in Europe, Quell Sarah, and North America Obsidian Edge, though pretty much every PvE server in my experience has some guilds taking on the hardcore challenge, with already a number of players hitting 60 within the first week and starting in later game dungeons. Some of it's pretty tense, it's a good watch. The goal of Ragnaros at the end of the journey is completely crazy the more you look at it. Imagine being a tank, having put in hundreds of hours of farming, consume prep, gearing, and you walk up to a Molten Giant and you just get parry hasted and crushed, and that's it, back to Elwyn. I know this all sounds very positive, but I never did private servers before. I'm betting this is just how your server looks when they're fresh, and things are going to fall off over time pretty quickly. But by this time in Classic, Molten Core and Onyxia had been cleared. In fact, they've been dead since day 5. The pace at which content was blasted through back then was absolutely remarkable. Looking at Warcraft logs, at least at the moment, there are 0 logs at all from any of the content, and it's been over a week. What is this, season of casuals or something? For real though, this feels more classic than classic did, because it looks as though the entire population hasn't taken 2 weeks off of their entire life to just absolutely blast leveling, but people are taking it from a much more casual stance. It seems the majority of the people got the Zerg out of their system, and the game does feel overall better for it. And if you have been feeling like coming back to Classic, or you haven't given it a go, I would recommend Season of Mastery, but it's kind of at odds if you do get into it, because in 12 months time our servers will be gone and you're going to end up with a character on Classic Era, which A, are not very lively in the first place, and B, if you play the entirety of Season of Mastery, I'm going to assume you will like the raiding here, which will be fundamentally different from Classic because you'll be able to use world buffs in Classic Era, as well as having 0 updated mechanics. It's going to feel like a totally watered down version of the game you've been playing. But coming from a new player perspective in TBC at the moment, and the amount of people out in the open world, it's just absolutely non-existent, even on the mega servers that we have compared to Season of Mastery. We can thank Boost from Blizzard and players for that. I even did a quick /who on Firemore versus Kingsfall at 11 AM on a Thursday. If we look on Firemore, this is the biggest server in Europe, by the way, and I'm looking on the Alliance side, which has the highest population. Lower level zones have on average around a dozen or so players, which is not bad by any means for a version of the game which is so progressed, but you do want a lot of people in those zones so you can group up, there's other people out and about doing stuff, and it just feels more alive. On Kingsfall, every single zone is capped at the amount of players you can search. Not surprising, but again, it's nice to have when you're leveling and coming back as a new player. But one of the biggest changes with Season of Mastery is not through the leveling phase, it's through the end game, the new abilities on bosses. There seems to be a bit less interest in guilds recruiting for that over people just doing the leveling. Maybe too many people have seen the end game loop through too recently. I think things like the hardcore community projects where people are willing to restart characters again and again and again to try and achieve that journey of hitting 60 shows this as well. And the reason I say this is Blizzard announced Vash, Morrogrim and Kel'Thas nerfs ahead of Phase 6 1 month in advance. They will be nerfed on December 14th. And people are up in arms about whether they need to nerf it or they need to delay it further or just do it with a patch. So for myself, bit of a story time. I used to raid Cutting Edge on retail, and in Battle for Azeroth we were progressing on Jaina. Fantastic fight, by the way. The patch was closing in 8.2, and in retail there tends to be several nerf waves to content at the mythic level. The post or during world first nerfs if something is just way overtuned, the midway through the patch nerfs to give the people who are close to CE or when bosses are just a bit over the top a bit of a leg up, and then the right towards the end of the patch or on the patch nerfs so you can pretty much get your kills. So the fight we're progressing on Jaina had been toned down, but it was still not an easy fight by any stretch of the imagination. And we were getting to the point where we were just a few percentage off, and in the end we narrowly missed out on the kill as the next set of nerfs came in. We went in the next raid night and 7 pulls later the boss went down, and it felt kind of underwhelming knowing you were so close to getting it pre-nerf, all that work progressing not just on that boss but on everything beforehand as well. This is why when Blizzard said we're nerfing tier 5 on literally the reset day, they went back on that decision within the space of an hour. But it is normal to expect nerfs to content close to a new patch or on the patch if it's providing too much of a challenge for too many people to overcome. For Warcraft logs, let's have a look at the number of players who have completed 10 out of 10 and those who are still progressing. As of when I did this, the numbers will be a bit higher, but I don't think it'll have changed much from a percentage point of view. 11,099 guilds are 10 out of 10, 12,747 have progressed up to 9 out of 10, and 9,572 have progressed up to 8 out of 10, which means there's still a lot of people struggling at the end game this much time later. But this is what we asked for, harder content. This is pre-nerf tier 5, and the majority of guilds who have progressed have not completed the content still, up to the point where Blizzard have confirmed they are going to be nerfed. For reference, I believe at least the nerfs will be removing mind control on the last phase of Vash, removing health from advisors, weapons and KT in the last phase, so basically the entire fight, and removing the majority of the health from the Murlocs on Morrogrim. Also, tinfoil hat time. They're making sure that people have cleared tier 5 because you must have cleared tier 5 to enter Mount Hyjal, and you must have killed the first boss in Mount Hyjal to enter BT. So you remember when they put out the Blackrock Quartermaster or the Lights Out Chapel quest ahead of BWL next, so people had time to attune before thousands turned up on the patch day, or it was griefed or camped to oblivion for a few days, which it would have been. So when we look back at Classic, where raids were rolled over due to world buffs and our 1.12 talents and gear, and then we take out the majority of that equation, are people really going to want harder fights? Here's another question. Do you think at any point throughout Season of Mastery, any fight will be more difficult than pre-nerf KT or Vash at the moment? People are hitting that roster boss hard in TBC at the moment. Imagine that with 15 extra raiders. What about the consume farming? Will the changes be enough to keep people stocked up with everything they'll need? What about the meme specs? Are they only ever seeing a raid spot due to how many people you need in a raid to keep it going? Is the idea behind Season of Mastery and harder bosses literally a case of you think you do, but you don't? Because to some extent, it's looking like Tier 5 has already achieved that. It's honestly hard only having seen MC and Onyxia so far, which sure was cleared on the beta, but I'm going to say the average player choosing to take part in a beta is a bit more invested than the average gamer out there. It is hard to say this early what the fate of the endgame will be, but what I can say currently, Fresh is doing fresh stuff. It feels super active, it feels good to play on, and I'm not going to delude myself into thinking it'll be this way forever, but for the time being at least, it feels like a good place to be. Let me know your thoughts, whether you've been playing, whether you're planning to raid at the endgame, and if you test it on the beta at all, how you think it will be for the average guild. It's going to be interesting to follow. As always guys, thank you so much for watching and listening in. I shall see you all in the next one very soon.